Welcome everyone tonight to the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. I'm John Sonner. I am Chair of Voter Services for the Acton Area League chapter. Tonight's forum is co-sponsored by 3 other chapters, the Concord-Carlisle, the Harvard, and the Sudbury chapters. The League of Women Voters encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, studies public policy issues, and influences policy through education and advocacy. The League is a nonpartisan organization and does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. Now, a few announcements here. One is starting this year, Massachusetts is allowing early voting in presidential elections. So starting today, you'll be able to vote early. If you need to find out how, check on your town's website. The other is I want to put in a plug for November 13th. There is a forum put on by the Sudbury chapter for mental health. There's flyers there by the door. So I'd like to ask everybody to please silence your cell phones and other devices. And please don't take flash photographs or video the program. ActonTV is recording this tonight. They'll be sharing it with other local TV stations, and it'll be available on websites as well. Now, tonight's forum is a chance for voters to learn more about 2 panels of candidates, the Middlesex and Worcester Senate and the 14th Middlesex District Representative. The forum moderator will introduce each panel and explain our forum and ground rules. The League would like to thank ActonTV, the Town of Concord, the 4 chapters, Concord, Carlisle, Sudbury, Acton Area, and Harvard chapters. And we want to thank everybody here for participating. Now, please join me in welcoming the moderator for tonight's forum, Debbie Winnick. Debbie is a past president of the Needham League of Women Voters and a past member of the State League of Women Voters Board. She's currently Voter Services Chair for the Needham League chapter. Debbie is a trained moderator and has presided over many candidate forums in the Metro West area.
Thank you, John. It's my job to make sure that you understand our format. The format tonight is pretty straightforward and nonpartisan, as John mentioned. I will ask the same question to all 3 candidates on both panels. The candidates will each have 90 seconds to respond unless we feel that there needs to be some kind of conversation that continues, and I will determine that as I listen to the answers. You have all been offered or hopefully have the opportunity to submit questions on index cards. We have a panel of league members who are sorting those questions. So basically what they're doing is they're making sure that the handwriting is legible so that I can read it. We are combining questions if indeed they match and if they, so we don't have any overlap. And then they are going to present me with the questions and then I will present them to the candidates. Obviously we're going to have more questions than we have time for, so the goal is to reach a lot of different topics. We have timers in the front row to keep me aware of our timeframes and as well the candidates. They are volunteers. They will raise signs to indicate when there are 60 seconds left, 30 seconds left, and when the time has expired. And I will ask each candidate to stop speaking when their time has expired. And also, we will avoid any over-talking. We won't have that here. No rebuttals or interruptions. We ask the audience to refrain from any applause or any kind of approval or disapproval because that would just take time away from our candidates. You won't hear as many answers to your questions, and that's really more appropriate. Approval is more appropriate for the end. The League of Women Voters, the sponsoring leagues, have started us off with some questions. We already have some questions from the audience. So if what you hear in the conversation raises a question in your mind, all you have to do is raise your hand, and we've got some league members with index cards, and we can get you index cards. The seating and question order of the beginning of our forum has been determined at random. Once we get started, opening statements will be 2 minutes each. Once we get started, I will rotate the response of each candidate. So I will identify which candidate answers the question first, second, and third, and our goal is not to have the same pattern throughout the entire process. Gets a little complicated sometimes, so if you think that I've missed somebody, feel free to make sure I get back on track. But I do have my little chart. The League requires that candidates in the audience show respect at all times, both to make the forum as productive as possible and to demonstrate an appreciation for democracy. And now the candidates for state senator are Ted Busiek. Also, if I mispronounce the name, please correct me. It's Busiek. Ted Busiek, Republican Party. Terra Friedrichs, Independent. And Jamie Eldridge, Democratic Party. And we will start with opening statements, 2 minutes each, in that order. Ted? Right.
Can everybody hear me all right? I want to start by thanking the League of Women Voters. I'm really appreciative that they would throw this shindig. I want to thank all of you for coming here. This room is packed, which I just feel so honored to be here and have the interest of so many people. I'm not a politician. I've never ran for office before. I'm actually a mechanical engineering student at Merrimack College on the GI Bill. I took a semester off to do this because I'm severely dissatisfied with the representation that we have right now. Specifically, I really don't feel like my interests, the interests of my family, my friends, my neighbors, just about anybody whose situation I'm tangentially even aware of, are being represented on Beacon Hill at all. It isn't that the answers to the questions are being asked are wrong, it's that the right questions just aren't even being asked. Nobody on Beacon Hill seems interested in dealing with the tremendous wage depression that workers are suffering, with the loss of manufacturing that we're seeing across the Commonwealth, with the sort of state-sanctioned cultural rot that's degrading our society. And so I'm running to start to stem that tide. I would like to be somebody who represents you, who works for you, and I would like to change the dynamic of our two-party, one-party state, in which I feel that one party openly attacks us and the other party distracts us. The Republican Party, I feel, has been sort of a harmless safety valve for too long. It's another thing I want to change. I'm Ted Busiek, and I'm psyched to be here.
Thank you, Ted. And Terra, your opening statement, please.
Yes, thank you very much, the League, for organizing this. I know it's a lot of work to organize. I'm here because I believe that a better world is possible, and I want to help make that better world possible. I feel like we can't continue on the unsustainable train we're on. I believe that we are watching the gutting of the middle class. We're watching the destruction of our environment. We're effectively engaging in unsustainable growth at our children's demise. We can't continue to do this. And as Ted says, we're not even asking the right questions. I engage in a planning group that's regionally planning infrastructure, and their idea of sustainability is cutting back and conserving. And with this drought that we experienced this summer, I think that you guys, I don't think you're going to be able to conserve enough to allow for, in Acton, only 1,200 new units of housing at 300 gallons per day. And so I'm running to have a forum to ask these questions, to be able to face you and explain why I think these are devastating impacts of growth and inappropriate planning that if we don't rise up in a sense and force these issues upon our legislative candidates, then they don't have that motivation to actually take the hard stance against the large corporations which are dominating the State House. And so I urge you to vote for me is a sign to the established Democrats in the government that that in fact they should be looking at these things and that they need to take a harder look and a harder stance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. And Jamie, your opening statement, please, 2 minutes.
Great. My name is Jamie Eldridge. I've been proud to be your state senator for the past 8 years for the Middlesex and Worcester District. I want to thank the Acton, Concord, Harvard, and Sudbury Leagues of Women Voters for organizing this forum. This is a terrific turnout. I also welcome fellow candidates, independent candidate Terra Friedrichs and Republican candidate Ted Busiek. And when I think about the district that I represent, it's a district that is very focused on wanting to know where candidates stand. It's very issues focused, and they don't want a legislator just to go up there and do constituent services, as important as that is, but to fight and be the leader on core group of issues that makes a great deal of difference to the people of the Middlesex and Worcester District. That's why several years ago I helped lead the fight with Representative Corey Atkins to change the Chapter 70 formula to dramatically increase education aid for the Acton-Boxborough School District and other school districts. It's why I fought in expanding access to health care this session for those suffering from Lyme disease. It's why I led the fight in filing legislation on public records reform to making sure that everyday citizens have access to government information just like everyone else. I also have led the effort on civil rights legislation, from protecting same-sex marriage early on in my career and in the past 2 sessions, being a co-sponsor in fighting for transgender rights to make sure all people in Massachusetts have the same rights. And finally, been a leader on climate change, making sure that Massachusetts has just the right set of incentives to invest in solar, while also moving forward this session and requiring utility companies to require 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind. It will be the highest number in Massachusetts, in the United States, here in Massachusetts. I'm asking for your support tonight, and I look forward to the discussion over the course of tonight's debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we're going to go into the question and answer format. The questions will be asked the same question of all 3 candidates, and each candidate has 90 seconds. So timers, are we ready? Here we go. Jamie, first question is to you. There were several questions that were submitted about not only our presidential race, but also the 4 statewide ballot questions. So the question is, combining that, can you tell us who you're supporting for president and where you stand on the 4 ballot questions?
Absolutely. So, as probably many people know, I was a very strong supporter of Bernie Sanders. I thought he ran a terrific race, and with his concession in the presidential race, I'm very proud to also support Hillary Clinton. I've been going up to New Hampshire to help her out. On the referendum, the 4 questions, question 1, which would allow another slot machine in Massachusetts, I'm voting no. I was one of the leaders in the Senate to oppose bringing any casino gambling to Massachusetts and continue to oppose that. On question 2, regarding lifting the cap for charter schools, I am very concerned about the funding formula for charter schools and how it could affect suburban school districts, so I'm opposed to that. On question 3, regarding animal rights, specifically prohibiting small cages for livestock throughout Massachusetts, I am a very strong supporter of animal rights, and so therefore I'm supportive of question 3. And question 4, which probably has generated the most discussion in the course of attending community events in my district regarding legalizing recreational marijuana for adults. Difficult decision, but I have decided to support it, to vote yes. I'm a big proponent of criminal justice reform, and I am concerned about the impact on the disparities in arrest rates versus those who are white and people of color, including marijuana arrests. I also think it's something that, at the end of the day, there are a certain percentage of people in Massachusetts who use marijuana, and I'd rather get it out of the dark alleys, move it away from drug cartels, and support legalizing it.
Thank you very much. Ted, same question to you, please.
Okay, I guess I'll start with the ballot questions. Question 1 is slot machines. I don't really care about slot machines. I don't use slot machines, so I'll vote yes. Let them go for it. I don't care. I just don't see a reason to tell people, no, you can't provide this form of entertainment. just because it's not something that I do. Question 2, charter schools, absolutely yes. More competition is better in any kind of market. Question 3, the Dear Little Animals, absolutely voting yes. I recommend everybody in this audience see the movie Food Incorporated to understand what we're talking about here when we're talking about this disgusting sort of massive mechanical operation of harvesting animals for our consumption. Question 4 is the only question on which I'll vote no. I don't feel like legalizing marijuana takes the country in the direction that I want to go culturally, or takes the Commonwealth rather. And finally, I'm an unequivocal supporter of Donald Trump for the presidency. Encourage everybody here to vote for him if you haven't already done early voting. I'm thrilled that in the Republican Party we're really taking a turn back towards nationalism and populism. I see that in the Democratic Party, like Senator Eldridge, I was an admirer of Bernie Sanders.
Thank you.
But I see that movement being crushed on the other side of the aisle.
Thank you very much. Tara, the same question, please.
Thank
Your
you.
opinions.
I agree with Jamie on all the ballot initiatives, and I won't waste time talking about that. I'm super happy when a Republican agrees with me, and I'm so happy to hear about the animal rights thing. Yay, go Ted on that. But I want to take a little moment to talk about Bernie, who I'm a huge supporter of, and I hope that Hillary gives it back to him because I feel like it's rightly his. In absence of Bernie, I will either, depending on what the campaign decides, either writing in Bernie or voting for Jill, because third-party candidates are so important, as I am one, for raising issues, for encouraging a movement in a progressive fashion, and I think that Jill running has been a fantastic thing. So, and I still have more time. Excellent. So I almost was going to vote no on the marijuana bill, primarily because small farmers came to me and begged me to oppose the large corporate industrial movement to take over, in a sense, the marijuana industry. And they felt like the small organic growers were much healthier and better for people. And so I'm not sure if Jamie helped with this, but the language now provides for the commission, it limits the commission's fees to be, it can't be anything that disturbs the economic viability of small farmers. So that's very exciting to me, so I will vote yes on marijuana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You did that just perfectly because they were just
watching
about
them.
to
When
raise
they
that time
raised that
card.
time thing, I'm like-
Okay, we're on to our next question. Tara, this one comes to you first. If elected, which committees would you like to be appointed to and why?
Well, I definitely would like to be on anything financial because I have a master in finance and I'm really good at uncovering money, doing balance sheet audit checks. I found a couple $1 million within a short period of time once I was elected for the Board of Selectmen. I think I helped restructure how we look at finance in terms of projections and also the outcosting that's done by large corporations primarily. The small local companies do less of this, but the large corporations, as part of my Master in Finance training, believe it or not, there was a whole class on outcosting. So you figure out ways to shift costs, like Walmart shifts cost into welfare and public services. So for me, I want to be on finance committees because I want to get sustainability to be something that's actually measured so that when people pass laws that impact the costs that go into your pockets, not just stuff that goes in and out of the State House, but there's a lot of costs that go in and out of your pockets that are impacted by votes, including environmental causes, homelessness. The cost of one homeless person is about $30,000 a year, and it costs only about $15,000 a year to house them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Jamie, as the incumbent, this question needs to be tweaked a little bit. So what committees do you sit on, and would you like to stay on them? Are there other committees that you would like to be appointed to, should you be reelected?
Sure. Well, I feel very honored to serve on the Senate side as the chair of the Financial Services Committee, and one of the bills worked very hard to get out of committee and pass into law is the Lyme disease law to require health insurance companies to pay for Lyme disease antibiotic coverage by doctors. We also put a great focus on consumer protection and was proud to file a bill that would limit the ability for debt collectors to go after consumers who owed money. I hope to stay as chair of that committee. I also serve as the vice chair of the Senate Global Warming and Climate Change Committee, and worked very hard this session both to pass raising the net metering cap for solar, as well as the offshore wind so-called omnibus energy bill. So I hope to stay on that committee. I also serve on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee. The legislature made great strides in a strong opioid abuse law that I would also commend Governor Baker for his efforts, but very proud of the legislature's work on that, as well as my service on the committee. And then finally, I do serve on the Education Committee. And I will say an area where I really have very strong disagreements with Governor Baker is that he has cut our environmental agencies, including the DEP. He's proposed weakening the enforcement of our wastewater laws, and he's been very weak on tackling climate change. And so I'm proud to be on a committee where I can push back on some of his proposals, including trying to tax all of us to pay for an expanded natural gas pipeline. That's a victory we won, but there's more to do, and that's why I'd like to stay on all those committees.
Thank you. And Ted, which committees would you like to serve on if appointed, if elected? I'm sorry.
So I'm kind of copycat Terra. Financial committees are, anything related to taxes or the economy is sort of where my interests are in terms of what I want to see accomplished. The things that I'm running to, a lot of people in this room probably already know. The big thing I'm pushing for is a complete sales tax exemption for any product made in Massachusetts. I have a tiered minimum wage proposal to help fight wage inflation. So those kinds of committees, I think, is probably where my interests lie. I take it sort of a dim view of the committee system as a mechanism for legislation. I think it defers too much responsibility. It's sort of a get out of work free card, I think, to too great of an extent. And I would say I'm a little surprised that Jamie would tout his work on net metering on the environmental committee, because my understanding is that net metering for solar power is 1-to-1 right now, and it's going to after January, it's going to 1.6-to-1 or something like that. So maybe I'm misinformed, but I felt reasonably well assured that net metering was taking a turn for the worse starting next year. That doesn't seem like an accomplishment to me.
Thank you. Why don't we stay on that topic? Let's start with Jamie on that one, since the question went to Ted raised the question about net metering. Do you want to speak to it? 90 seconds.
Sure, yeah. So the net metering legislation, it faced some significant obstacles in getting passed. The Senate version did raise the cap, so basically requiring utility companies to maintain the incentive when people put up solar on their home, to create that financial incentive to encourage more people to put up solar on their homes. So we were successful in raising that net metering cap, although we're close to having to raise it again because so many people are putting up solar. Unfortunately, the utility industry and their lobbyists really pushed back behind closed doors to cut some of the subsidies for community solar. That was something that was very frustrating, because I'm very proud that the first community solar project, the so-called community solar farm, I worked very hard to build in the town of Harvard. I worked with the residents there to build that. So it certainly wasn't everything that I'd hoped for, but it did allow for the solar incentives to continue to go forward and make sure that the financial incentive made sure that solar continued to be built across Massachusetts, and we did our part to combat climate change. But there's no doubt there is much more to be done.
Thank you. So, Terra, to you next. Net metering and climate change.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ted, the Republican, for bringing up the weakness in these bills and the weakness in our ability to pass things. And Jamie, thank you very much for bringing up behind closed doors, because this is one of the things I want to change. I want to know who my public employees are meeting with. I want to know what's being said. I want to know what deals are being made. I do not want to see the version that they agreed to. I want to see the version that you proposed. I want to see who is opposing it, and I want to see it in time to be able to object up front. I feel like there's way too much secrecy going on relative to these bills. I feel like the net metering was weak. It barely plugged a gap until, and then they have to go back and do it again. We sat in this room, this very room, with Corey and Jen, talking about how there was a gentleman that was installing solar who was begging them to pass the increase in the net metering so that they could process the hundreds of people that month that wanted to install solar. So for me, that's just, it's dramatic, or it's just unacceptable to think that that's good enough. And in terms of the gas leak thing, feel like that was written by the large corporations. The electric and hydro was a deal that Baker made with Big Electric. And for me, that also is not acceptable. Am I out of time? That we need to stop, we need to bring it back local. We need to bring it back so it's affordably made here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Ted, you brought up the topic, so I'm going to ask you if you want to talk about it a little bit more, or if you want to talk about solar or climate change, but let's stay in this general area.
I mean, I don't fancy myself a climatologist. I would say that just sort of as a pedestrian, I'm sort of skeptical of the idea of climate change. And even I see what a blunder it is to reduce state incentives for solar, because solar is a great part of our electric and our power infrastructure, right? So, you know, even a hard-bitten Republican like me can see the benefits of strengthening our energy infrastructure in the state without deference to alarmism about a scientific theory, then I just don't understand how the excuse could be made that, well, behind closed doors there were shadowy interests pushing for something less than what would be of the most benefit to the state.
Thank you. Our next question is about the north-south rail link. The question is, do you support it? And if so, what will you do to make sure it gets constructed? Jamie, you're first, please.
Yeah, happy to take this question. I've been very proud to be the lead on the Senate side in advocating for the north-south rail link that would connect through a tunnel underground about 1.1 miles to north and south stations that have always been apart because there were two different railroad companies that built them. And what this would do is not only benefit downtown Boston, but I would argue everyone who takes the commuter rail into Boston, so extending out to central Massachusetts. Because right now, a train that is in the south side of the system of the MBTA or the north side of the system, the trains have to stop and be moved to a separate track because there is no pass-through. If there was a tunnel that went through the north-south rail link, it would allow for that pass-through to make for more efficient cars. The estimate is that it would take approximately 55,000 cars off the road in eastern Massachusetts. That would reduce the carbon emissions that are created from cars. It would make it easier to get into Boston or Cambridge. And it would also provide an opportunity for people to take the train all the way up to Montreal or all the way south down to the Virginia, D.C. area. Obviously, it's an expensive project. We need the federal government to pay for the vast majority of the costs. That's something I'm working closely with leaders like Congresswoman Tsongas and Congressman Moulton on. And I do think it's something that if we're serious about addressing traffic issues, combating climate change, and also doing our step to take those cars off the road, it is a wise project in the future.
Thank you very much. Ted, same question, please.
Yeah, I mean, basically no disagreement from me. I think, one of the primary functions of a state government should be strengthening our infrastructure, and our transportation infrastructure comes right up front. So, I think it's a well-conceived project. I'm a supporter.
Thank you.
I don't need 90 seconds, I guess.
Okay, well, we'll get more questions. That's great. Tara?
Well, I'm so happy to also hear my Republican friend being excited about transportation infrastructure, because there have been so many years that the Republicans have not been in support of transit as a right, especially for urban areas, transit as a necessity for our climate, et cetera. I know, I'm so sorry, but that's how I feel. So, so relative to the cars off the road thing, I did some work on this, and yes, if all things were held equal, then a project like this would take cars off the road. And I am in favor of the project, very much so. I sat with Governor Dukakis myself personally and talked about this in various ways. But I want to say that the cars off the road thing doesn't work if you're accelerating or even pushing for more growth, smart growth, high density. You've got to take a look at the net of what's going on. And if you're trying to get cars off the road, one of the things you can do is stop building what we don't need. Because we have the latest smart growth, one of the latest smart growth projects in Acton had 2-car garages. So it was right next to the train station with two-car garages. So how does that factor into it? It doesn't, because the question that's not being asked, and Ted says, is what is sustainable, and how do these things all link together? So a lot of these proposals are siloed, and you talk about the benefits of this one, but you don't talk about the net impact of all of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next topic is healthcare. And Tara, this one goes to you first. There are two questions that I'm going to merge. So can you tell us what you think are the biggest issues facing the state in the area of health insurance? We could talk about that all night, but let's not. And what do you feel about single-payer health care?
Well, I think that, I'm not sure what that sign means. Last question, did I
Oh,
lose
this
some
is our
time?
last question
This is our last question,
till
sorry.
you have your closing
I get it
statements.
now, thank you. So,
That was fast.
Yes,
no,
it's
let
very
me go now.
fast.
So healthcare in 90 seconds. I believe that healthcare is a right. Right now, small business, the largest single cost for a small business outside of salaries is healthcare, anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 per person per month. I, as a tiny small business consultant, I have $1,200 a month in healthcare costs. This is unacceptable. Right now, a person that doesn't have health care has to pay money or doesn't pay money. They end up paying more because they don't have health care. And for me, I think that there's something wrong with that. We should be able to walk into public clinics and get served without having to share all of our personal information with private corporations. There's something wrong with it. Single payer, whatever you call it, nationalized health care, I think yes, now, yesterday.
Thank you. Jamie, same question,
Yeah, so
please.
as I said in the beginning, this district really demands leadership and taking the lead on issues and not just advocating for something. And so I am proud to be the Senate sponsor of an act to establish Medicare for all, effectively single-payer healthcare in Massachusetts. It's something that I think is going to begin to have a bigger conversation on next session because we've seen Obamacare be implemented. It's not going to be repealed. It's had a tremendous amount of benefits, but now the experimentation is really at the state level. And I think Massachusetts, given that we have arguably the best healthcare in the country, it's now to take that next step to make sure everyone has access, as well as reducing healthcare costs and do our part to help small businesses, which often pay much higher premiums than large corporations. So I will continue, if reelected, to lead the fight on single payer, and I do think it's time for Massachusetts to embrace that kind of healthcare as a right model.
Thank you. We're now going to move to closing statements. Closing statements are, I'm sorry. See, I told you had to keep me honest. Thank you, Ted.
Sorry, yeah, so this is one where I'll differ very sharply from my friends here. I think universal health care, it sounds so nice, doesn't it? But it's a very dangerous push, I think. What we're seeing right now on the education side, with the people, with the charter school question, is people wanting to break out of this one-size-fits-all system. They want more competition. They want more choice. It doesn't make any sense to me that we would say, we have this wonderful healthcare system here in Massachusetts. We have this great healthcare infrastructure, which we built largely without the need of government mandates or coercions. But now what we want to move to is the government controlling everything and nobody having any choices. There being a single state provider. It doesn't make sense that if it doesn't work well for education, that it would work well for healthcare. They do it in Canada, where I lived for a year. It's a shambles up there. They do it in the UK. The NHS is a nightmare. If you really want to know what universal healthcare means, it means more power for petty bureaucrats and less for you, and it means poorer health for everybody.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to our closing statements. We are going to hear from our candidates. It's a 1-minute statement in the order of Terra, Ted, and Jamie. Terra, please.
Thank you. I'm actually going to go back to healthcare because Ted's mom stopped me at Trader Joe's the other day, and she had this great idea, and she said that she thinks, and it goes along with my minimum income guarantee idea, well, it's not my idea, but promoting that if the government, quote unquote, gave $1,200 to every person who could then spend it on their choice of health care, and the government limited the amount that the doctors could charge for various things, that we could then achieve it while taking advantage of private enterprise competition. So I love that idea. I believe in a minimum income guarantee. Please look it up, folks. It encourages a innovation economy. It encourages the local community. It's a really low overhead way of dealing with folks that can't make enough to survive. We're already at 49% people on public services somewhere along the line. And open meeting law, why doesn't the State House obey open meeting law? Every other town, every other public entity is supposed to tell us what they're doing, give us agendas, post them so that we know what our public employees are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ted, your closing statement, please.
I just want to say, I want to clarify so that everybody understands, as much as my mother does love Terra, she has endorsed me in this race.
Well, of course she has.
I mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned something that I want to elaborate on a little bit. I said that I feel like we live in a two-party, one-party state, right? Obviously, the Democratic Party has had sort of a stranglehold on Beacon Hill for a while. I don't think that is a an inevitability due to our demographics or our outlook or anything like that. I think that the blame for that rests squarely with the Republican Party. So in running for this office, really, I think what I want to emphasize to all of you, Terra has made some backhanded comments about, well, Republicans traditionally this or that. My goal is not to fit a mold. My goal is to work for you, right? Is to make this Commonwealth work better for you.
Thank you.
I see that's my time.
That
Thanks.
is your time. Thank you so much. And Jamie, your closing statement, please.
Great. Well, once again, I want to thank the League for sponsoring this debate. It was a terrific discussion, and I knew it would go by very quickly. One of the things I did want to highlight is that as much as I am proud to take the lead on a whole host of issues, I also work very hard on delivering for the district. Things like increasing Chapter 70 aid for our schools, increasing regional school transportation and special education circuit breaker to make sure that every child gets the best possible education in each of the 14 communities I represent. I'm very proud of the improvements we've made in the transportation level, whether the Worcester commuter line or the Fitchburg commuter line, including a new South Acton train station, as well as 2 rail trails that are currently being built through Acton, as well as my work in investing in infrastructure that is added development like the Point in Littleton, as well as an incredible number of jobs and companies to the city of Marlborough. There are clear differences in this race. I do want to point out that my Republican opponent said that he was voting for and supported Donald Trump. I do want to add a piece to that. It's not simply that he's voting for Donald Trump, but he was actually a very strong supporter.
Thank you.
And describes himself as part of the alt-right nationalist political movement.
Thank you. Your time is
There's
up.
a difference, and therefore I ask
Thank
for your
you.
support on
Jamie?
Tuesday, November 8th.
Thank you very much.
All true. Thank you, Jamie.
We appreciate that. Okay, so we are going to transition from this panel to our next. Now you may clap. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.